This is the book that I've been using to build studios for a long time. This is the main resource. Rod Gervais built Avatar. That's the studio. You can see in these pictures here. This book is intense and has everything from electrical work to framing to floors, roof, ceilings, insulation. Anything you can think of for a studio building is in this book in detail with graphs. Every wall except for the rear wall, which is cinder block, is built like a simple wall here. The SDC 33 non-insulated wall. The first thing we did was strip out the inner drywall. Here you can see where the initial closet was. My goal was always to get rid of this closet to add that 2.5 feet roughly of space that the closet was taking up. Now, this closet was really framed in, so the demo was not as simple as I thought it would be. I thought it'd be much simpler than it ended up being. Knocking off layers of plaster. Here's the closet beam that came down. It was pretty big. It was larger than I thought. Now this is a smaller linen closet that you would access from an area on the way to my bedroom. I also wanted this space for this room, so I deleted that closet and built a double thick wall there. So here we have a lot of the demo done. A friend of mine, Sammie, did a lot of this work, and then my contractor, David, finished it up. Here's the old bookcase. It looked pretty cool, but it definitely was far from flawless. For acoustics, and for building that wall out so it would actually be worth building the studio, I had to tear it out. And the bookcase is finally gone. That's the bathroom right there. Just so you guys know, that bookcase was not original to the 1958 build. That was added sometime in the 90s. So I'm not destroying the house by doing that. You can see all this electrical laying over there. There's some plumbing that was laying over there from when the replumb happened. A bunch of this was going to have to get moved. Also, you see the ceilings are lofted and those beams are not. So I wanted that space available for treatment. Eventually, we did move the beams into a single beam or 2 single beams, I forget exactly, and filled insulation all the way to the top before we added drywall, double layer on the ceiling. In the ceiling deadening layers, there's a couple feet of treatment in there because it's lofted so high. So the room before all the treatment and all the construction was roughly 12 feet by 13.5, just shy of each, and roughly 156 square feet. Those dimensions are after the bookcase was removed and after the closet at the front was removed. So I'm walking back in the studio, and here we have the massive tube for the HVAC system, which runs all the way through the house from the garage. And the issue is, if I leave this how it is right here, even with soundproofing, if I have a lot of bass coming, this is going to act literally as like a megaphone for the entire house, feeding audio into every room. But here we have this massive duct that ran all the way through the house. It was aluminum with a loose piece of insulation around it. This was going to act as a megaphone, having sound and bass reverberate down the rooms. It's laying on the beams, which transfers vibrations, and it also just carries sounds through the open vents. So that was going to have to go, but that was the main heating system, meaning I was going to have to redesign how the whole house was heated to get it out of this room, both because of the reverberation, but also the space that huge duct took up. It was maybe 2.5 or 3 feet by 1.5 or 2 feet tall. It was very big. So at the end of the day, we ended up chopping it all out. The HVAC, there's where the duct used to be. The duct is gone all the way back. Now we can build all the way up here, insulate, blah, blah, blah. We ran flex ducting, which doesn't reverberate at all and has a layer of insulation around it. We ran that way above the treatment in the sealed off area. Both the plumbing and the heat are way up there. Now, fingers crossed I don't ever have an issue with that in the future, because it'll be an absolute nightmare if I need to get up there. On the back wall, the bathroom was there, so I just had to make sure to seal off everything. It was a lot of sealing. I spent a couple of full days just sealing cracks, filling stuff in, patching stuff with extra drywall, doing lots of caulking, acoustical caulking, stuff like that. Here you can see we're filling up vast amounts of insulation in the ceiling. According to the acoustician I used, Gerhardt, who's incredible, for this wall cavity gap insulation. You can use regular pink insulation. Now you do want to stuff it very densely, and the idea is that this gap is where the base goes to die, gets trapped in there kind of like a drum, and it dies out before it hits the next wall. Putting the insulation up was by far the worst part of the job, even worse than the demo, I think. It was so itchy. It would get everywhere, specifically from the ceiling. It would fall all over you. You'd have to wear a mask all day. It would still get in and get itchy. I'm glad it's over. So here you can see the beams have moved. You can see how they're triple stacked. David, my contractor, moved them closer, which I don't know if we needed to do at the end of the day, but we did it, and it ended up being easier for insulation. I thought I was going to be able to vault the entire ceiling up. That did not end up being possible. So that's why that ended up like that. Now we have the window. The original windows were single pane, super thin. I believe the original windows from the 50s. The glazing was all cracked on the windows, but getting a window company to come in and quote me, which I did, was about $2,500 for a window. That being said, they would not even do the thickness of glass I wanted, which is I wanted 1/2-inch thick glass, which is super thick, industrial level glass. The window is 2 different panes of glass that I had custom made down in Long Beach. This place is amazing. So what I ended up doing is ordering 2 panes of this glass, which only cost me about $650. However, I did have to go pick it up myself with the truck. I built a little jig for it out of 2x4s that I put in the back of my truck, and we went and picked it up. It was very heavy as well. It was not easy to move. It was very scary moving it, but it's extremely sturdy glass. Luckily, I measured the window correctly. It fit perfectly down to maybe 1/8 of an inch. Here you can see David's putting a support piece up to kind of hold the window in place as he's framing it in. Also, we got to use these cool suction cup tools, so, it felt like I was in a spy movie or something. One piece of the glass is in the original window frame in the concrete. It's framed in with some wood, and around the glass, we put rubber gaskets that I got on Amazon. They're 1/2-inch window gaskets. They work fantastic. They're kind of heavy, actually, but they seal up the window amazingly. Then there's a gap. In between the gap, I put a nice piece of cherry trim to match the rest of the trim in the room. Getting no dust to blow in there was so hard. It would constantly have dust. So as we put in the second layer, a little bit of dust would pop up in between. And since we were sealing it, we wanted to get that dust out. I didn't end up getting 100% of the dust out. I got probably like 97% of it. It still bugs me, but you cannot see it. It's really just me that knows that. Frame is in. There will be a cherry veneer going on top, but man, does it look good to have that window frame there. Nice big shelf there. Here's the room. Here's the second framing. There's a gap in between, you can see. We've insulated most of this. Now here's the roof. Behind this insulation is the roof. Then it goes over here. Now there's a cavity in there that I filled. And then this is all old plaster. All the little pockets are getting covered up here with, I'll add green glue in there, similar to like this pocket in here. After day 1 or day 2 of drywall, layer 1, woo, it's all boxed in. It's looking like a room finally. Very exciting. Now the drywall goes on normal, but the second layer is going to get turned 90 degrees so that the seams overlap each other and there's no air gap. Also, in between the 2 layers of drywall, I put a nice layer of green glue, which is a gooey substance that never fully dries. It dries kind of tacky. That acts as a deadening layer. All the walls are up. This layer is two layers of drywall, even though you can't see it because it's hidden. But you can see here, there's that second layer. There's the first one. So Sunday or Monday we'll be finishing up the rest of the drywall, and then begins the built-in treatment. So let's talk about electrical for a second. You can see the electrical hanging out of the walls. I had my electrician do that because I knew we were going to build another layer of framing for the acoustic treatment. For this room, I had 2 fresh lines coming from the main electric box outside ran into this room, so this room could have its own power supply. One of the channels I daisy chained to the next room over to fix some of the old electric in the house and give that other room more reliable power and fairly clean power. But one of the channels in this room always has completely its own power. And on each wall, there's 2 quad boxes, one for each of the electrical breakers. Check it out. We got these membranes that Gerhard designed. So these are floating an inch off the wall. They move. We also built membranes that run across the ceiling, the side walls, and the back wall. These are tuned to different frequencies. It's 1/4 inch in some places and 1/8 inch in other places, depending on the frequency. I can't remember exactly what was placed where, but we built these membranes. They're very easy, very cheap. They went up quick. Here you can see the plan for the room. Now, these yellow sections are the acoustic treatment. I built the framing to the specifications Gerhard gave me. Essentially, you take that drawing and just extend it wall long. So that's how much the room shrank on the sides and the rear wall. I think the treatment works down to 20 or 30 hertz, like very, very low, because of that huge bass trap in the back and the corner traps in the front, both sides, the angles there. He said the angle is the most important. Just having an angle, not what the angle is, that's less important. The corners we framed on an angle, so it'd kind of be a little entranceway and the walls would look cohesive. This will get beams and go straight to the edge. The light socket gets moved to this panel right here. And then we got framing coming across the ceiling, side to side. That all gets safe and sound all the way across 6 inches. And then right at the front here, it's gonna go down on an angle, and then you'll have about a foot of treatment right over the speakers. I have this section that goes lower in the front and then it raises. The reason for that was because otherwise that volume would have had to spread itself out along the rest of the ceiling, lowering the rest of the ceiling by a couple inches. And even though the front would have been higher, the whole room I think would have felt a bit more shrunk. And now it feels like it's framed out in the front. And since I'm using these floor to ceiling speakers, I need that space. Now this whole room would be rearranged differently if I didn't have these speakers, if I had normal on-stand desktop speakers. This front wall actually gets no treatment, and the speakers will be almost right up against it. We're gonna have beams going across here, safe and sound, and cherry panels, cherry trim going around with the trough for the cabling, and then we got these baffles back behind here. Check it out, the framing is done. And you can see we're building the shelf here so that the cable's can sit underneath and the insulation can sit above it. Then we'll fill this with insulation, get the electric in, stretch the fabric, and put the lighting in. The studio's done. Here is the HVAC, electric and piping. Goes into a hole in the wall. This will get caulked even further. Then that goes down behind, and then outside there's a condenser. Let me back up. The unit's gonna get mounted right there. And that's it, super simple. Got the bracket here. This is a support piece, right? You added? Yeah, Cool, awesome, thanks.
Cool. Yeah.
Oh, it's still a copper fitting back there.
Yeah,
Okay.
This is a copper fitting right here. Yeah. That's why I was asking if it's accessible in the future. Just in case of anything, you know?
Yeah, yeah. What are the odds it's gonna drip back there?
Oh, it shouldn't drip at all, man.
Around the edge of the room where the treatment is, we built a trough so that we could run cables behind the baseboard and hide most of the room's wiring. Here is the trough we built. Not the prettiest, but it will be functional. Here's the trim. It's unfinished right now. This is only, it's as wood conditioner on it, but nothing else. There's no stain or poly on this yet. It's not cut to size. And this will sit right here, and it'll have magnets holding it. But today we're taking this batting, and we're covering up all the gaps on the backside where the insulation could kind of rain dust down into the cables. We just don't want that. So this is also what we're gonna put on this side between the insulation and the canvas, but we're gonna put on the backside so it doesn't breathe in between these cracks here and drop down into the trough, or in between these areas. We'll cover that up, and then these gaps back here. These shelves are not terribly strong, but they don't need to be. They'll just be insulation sitting on them. And there's no extra pressure that'll ever be added to those. And then they're just a barrier between the insulation and down here. Initially, we had taped up. I had taped up a corner. I was like, I'll cover the backside with tape. But then I realized I'm really limiting the air travel when I do that, getting back in and out of these areas. I didn't want to create like a base cavity down here as much as I could limit that. That's why they can breathe everywhere. Reload. So the first front corner base trap is complete. We have that baffling between the room and the insulation. The insulation will also fill up all this, and the normal insulation will fill this back wall, and more safe and sound all over this room. We stuffed most of that, just covered that a little bit for now. We're going to finish that tomorrow. For all the acoustical treatment insulation, we use Safe and Sound. The heavier stuff, you can still get that at Home Depot. So on top of the insulation is Dacron to stop the insulation from breathing through the fabric into the room. It works great. We don't have any issues. More insulation, of course, means more insulation dust, some more horrible work. There was so much insulation work in this project. If you want to build a studio, you essentially are just an insulation installer, and that's about as fun as it gets. Getting really close now. The back base trap was supposed to use this fluffier, lighter insulation. I'm not sure exactly why, but we follow the directions. Put these rods in here. They're just like pins essentially all the way across, and they lift it up so it's not going to sag down over the edge. As you can see here, if I go right up to the edge, nothing's sagging down. And same all the way around here. And we'll cover that little piece up, but yeah, almost ready to get the tracking and the rest on. Still a mess in here, but as you can see, the insulation is done. Look at that, the whole dang thing. Now it's time to do some cleanup and start testing, get a test photo for what the canvas looks like, and start mocking up the room for furniture and rugs and whatever else. The fabric is generic muslin. I just got a color that I liked. I got it at the fabric store in downtown LA. Here you can see the window framing as well and how deep it is and how deep the trapping is. Here we're testing the fabric. We like the look, so we decided to go ahead with it. But here you see the mock-up of generally what the room was gonna look like. Nearly finished. Got the satin poly on here and the stain, and it's really pretty. This is gonna be vertical like this. 3 of them side by side. Should look really, really nice. For the front of the room, I used 1/4-inch cherry plywood. It's an MDF with a cherry veneer on there. I finished those panels in my garage. Tyler and I cut them to size and then installed them. You have to make sure you get your angles and your cuts completely straight, or you will see the seam in the middle of the room. Also, you have to consider the wood grain and how much you want to line that up. This is the first panel I installed. I did pretty good. I'd give myself an A-. There's a couple little details I might have fixed up on another round, but it looks very good. And it doesn't look completely seamless waterfall style in the front, but it looks great and I'm happy with the result. The cool thing about doing this in cherry was I had the speakers built in cherry also. So I wanted to continue the theme from the living room into this room, which is essentially white and this kind of golden color, which was easy to sustain in cherry, even though I think the rest of the house is not originally cherry wood on the walls. Also, the grain is very pretty. At the front, I put LED strips. I've left about a 1/2-inch gap all along the front for the LED strip to hide. I also did that on the sidewall in between the panels. It's worked out great. It looks great. I'm happier with that than I would have been with sconces. I made the LED strips just cool and white, so I wouldn't be tempted to make it a color that I usually would call tacky. It does strobe like this. It does work with the music. I've never put it in that mode. I hope to never put it in that mode. The acoustic treatment is covered by fabric. That is the walls. We have kind of false walls in here. The system we use to install the fabric is called Fabric Mate. I think there's more generic companies that make something similar, but we went with the brand name. Because they're based in California, so I got to go see it. They showed me how to install it. So here we're installing the Fabric Mate plastic trim that holds the fabric in. It essentially acts as a frame to stretch the fabric across. So here's the track. The fabric gets pressed into there with a tool, and then this gets, like these, stapled to the edge here, or nailed to the edge, or screwed either way to the edge. You make little frames, then you press them in. So that has to be seamed somewhere, but you'll see no plastic because the fabric will come from this side and from this side into the same seam. These plastic pieces need to be aligned perfectly to get a perfect seam on the corners. You have to do a very, very good job cutting these. And the angles, when you're doing multiple angles meeting up in a certain point, can start to get confusing. You're also cutting plastic, which has a tendency to tear. So that's kind of scary sometimes. It jumps around on the chop saw a little bit. Maybe there's a better way to cut this, but it ended up working out fine. The plastic ends up spraying everywhere too. It's almost worse than wood in certain ways because it sticks to clothing and a lot of stuff. If there's a better way to chop plastic than this miter saw, let me know. The cutting and installing of these trim panels took longer than the fabric installation. It really was a lot of detailed work, and I didn't understand how detailed until some of the panels started going up. I got the first track in. You can see the shape. The fabric will be pressed in there. Behind there's a little LED panel. You can't even really notice it. And, sorry, I'm chewing on a popsicle. It's not terribly difficult to install. It is tedious and tough if you're doing a full room. Your hands and arms will get tired, but if you give yourself a couple days to do it, it's really not too bad. After the first panel or so, you'll really get the hang of it. The very first panel I did, I ended up redoing, maybe even a second one, I can't remember, and after that, it was smooth sailing. The corners. If you have strange angles, the corners are the trickiest part by far. We have a lot of strange corners in here, and the muslin can get a bit thin and it can want to tear, so that's the trickiest part. but most of the details disappear. They're not something that draws the eye at all. So you can see we would press the fabric in. If it was a corner, I'd use a smaller, like butter knife style tool that I had just laying around the kitchen. Otherwise, I would use their plastic and metal tools that I got from them when I bought the kit. The pizza roller is very good for long, straight edges. And then the rocker tool is good for kind of tighter areas closer to the corner and up to some corners. The corner tool worked okay, but it wasn't my favorite tool. It was hard to press into the plastic. Yeah, no, I think we nailed it.
Cool.
You have just about the right amount of space to still have a little bit to cut off for the other piece of trim that'll be permanently attached there. We're going to end up needing to pop a hole in this here somewhere anyways to get all the cabling through it. The baseboard wood I bought on eBay, and that was a good result. And then the corner trim I got from Ganal Lumber. They're in California. I'm not sure if they're nationwide or not, but they're a great lumber yard. All the wood, all the trim was done by me in the garage over the course of the winter. Oh yeah, it's where the desk will be. Let's zoom out. Tyler's right here. HVAC seats back there. Synth will be covering up this seam because it'll be wall mounted. Another one here. We got lights there, and our big window. And the rest of the electrical panels come tomorrow. Here's the original subwoofer, a desk I had set up for a little while. This whole setup was a mess. I rearranged everything. I'm sure I'll rearrange it again. I'm currently building a custom keyboard rack, so stay tuned for that on the channel. But here's the initial mock-up of just throwing the gear in the room.
But that ain't nothing new. You wasting all my time, I gotta tell the truth. I'm running these lights, I'm climbing these heights just to get through to you. I'm losing my sight, I'm losing my mind, feel like I'm losing you. I'm getting faded till I fade away. Faded till I fade away. Faded till I fade away.
We're here in the finished studio. It took about 1.5 years to complete, and I'm very happy with the result. The room definitely shrunk a bunch, but it's been worth it because it sounds amazing in here. I'm not sure if you can tell off the phone, but it is so dead in this room.